Hey there, my name is Dallas, and I'm one of the pastors here at Doxology Bible Church. Today, you're going to hear from Pastor Chris Freeland. He is our pastor at our Southwest congregation, and he will be in Luke 23 as we continue talking about the journey to the cross for Jesus. We're going to look at today the thieves on the cross and the interaction of what happens between them and the promise and the grace that Jesus gives to them. So grab a notebook, grab some paper, take some notes, and follow along with us as we continue this journey together.
If you got a Bible, go ahead and grab it and meet me in Luke 23 today. You may already be there if you were here last week. I told you we're in 3 weeks in Luke 23, so you may have anchored there or bookmarked there last week. If you're here this week, you finally find it, go ahead and bookmark it for next week. We're going to be back in Luke 23 again. Just taking a look through Luke 23 for 3 weeks in a row. A lot of times when we go into a teaching series and study a passage, we just kind of go verse by verse through it and follow the logic trail all the way through the passage. On this one, I think really the best way to understand the meaning of the passage and make that the meaning of our message is to take the layers that Luke shows us in Luke 23. So that's what we're doing. We're looking at the whole chapter for 3 weeks in a row, looking at 3 different layers that I think Luke wants us to see. He tells us at the very beginning of his gospel that his method for writing what he wrote was to consult with a whole lot of eyewitnesses, the people that walked with Jesus and listened to Jesus and learned from Jesus along the way, to put together a well-researched historical account of the life of Jesus so that people who didn't get a chance to eyewitness Jesus and to see it and to hear it in person would have the chance to benefit from what they saw and heard. And so Luke 23 is the chapter about the cross. And in these weeks leading up to Good Friday and Easter, we're looking at 3 different layers there in Luke 23 to see what the death of Jesus on a cross 2,000 years ago has to do with people like you and me. So since we're in Luke 23, logically, weeks ago, we decided to name the series 23 and Me. So yes, I know that you all saw this news story first thing on Monday morning, because almost literally all of you text messaged me this news story first thing on Monday morning. So when I'm elected president, day one, executive order from the Oval Office is going to be to eliminate all group text messaging. Anybody with me? That's what my phone sounded like Monday morning first thing. It was just like with you sending me this news story about the company 23 and Me, which is now no more. So a couple of things. I did not pick the series title. Most of you know we've got 3 distinct congregations, 3 lead pastors that preach 3 unique messages every week, but always on the same passage. And it gives us the benefit of studying together and working together on some of those things. That helps make all of us better, except when Brian Smith hooks a sermon series title to a sinking ship company. So he's the one that needs the text messages, guys. So his cell phone number, go ahead and write this down, is 817- I actually might do that to him one of these days. I wouldn't do it to him today. Actually, here's the funny thing about this whole deal. It works out pretty great. Not if you're a shareholder or if you're the former CEO of 23andMe. But as a sermon illustration, it works out pretty good for us today. So this company, 23andMe, if you're not familiar with it and weren't here last week, is a company that developed this technology that could discover and then send you this deep dive report into your ancestry and a whole lot of stuff about you from a vial of spit that you send them in the mail. And some people did this. Some of you did this. You found out really fascinating things about yourself. In fact, one guy told me earlier this week, he discovered a really good thing. Like, he discovered that he had a rare blood disorder and was able to get treatment that solved a whole lot of problems in his life, and it all came from this 23andMe thing. So some of you uncovered really good stuff, helpful stuff about yourself. Some people found out uncomfortable things, maybe even disturbing things. So Carrie and I have a friend who discovered that the person that she thought was her biological father was actually her uncle. So some hard stuff can get found in a deep dive of stuff like that. But the truth is, and this is what we said last week, good, bad, or ugly, when you get news from 23andMe, it is never neutral news. You got to respond to it. But here's what the company 23andMe discovered the hard way. There's a limited number of people who are willing to take a deep dive like that into themselves. Some people just won't do it because they'd rather live in blissful ignorance of what they might discover. The stuff that they don't know, they just decide they don't really want to know, and maybe for all kinds of different reasons. But secondly, the thing that this company discovered is of the group of people that did take that deep dive into themselves and discover some stuff for them, use that product, it was a one and done thing for them. They took the deep dive once. They learned what they felt like they needed to know or wanted to know, and then they never went back to it again. So from a market standpoint, 23andMe was not a very great business model. The business failed. Here's the jumping point to Luke 23. The cross is not going to fail. But we can, if we respond the same way to the cross as people responded to 23andMe. If we treat it like 23andMe, we either ignore it because we don't want to know. We're afraid of what it may say, so we just stay on the surface and never go deeper. Or if we treat a response to it like just a one-time thing that we did in the past. Last week we saw the cross points us towards a king whose agenda won't let you down. That it points us towards a supernatural God who can walk back our biggest fears and failures and rewrite the end of a story that feels like it may be over. But today's layer 2, when it feels like the deck is stacked against you, when it feels like we're losing, even when we realize we deserve to lose everything. Rome's ultimate symbol of defeat is our only hope for victory. Rome's ultimate hope and symbol for defeat is our only hope for victory. Look with me, Luke chapter 21, beginning in verse 1 again. Luke chapter 23, beginning in verse 1. It says, "Then the whole assembly rose and led him," that's Jesus, "off to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, 'We found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be the Messiah, a king.' So Pilate asked Jesus, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' 'You say,' Jesus replied. Then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, 'I find no basis for charge against this man.' But they insisted. 'He stirs up people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee, and now he's come all the way here.' On hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. When he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased because for a long time he'd been wanting to see him. From what he'd heard about him, he hoped to see him perform a sign of some sort. He plied him with many questions, but Jesus gave him no answer. Then look at the crowd of people here. The chief priests, the teachers of the law were standing there, vehemently accusing him. And then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. Dressing him in an elegant robe, they sent him back to Pilate. When Carrie and I were first dating and then first married, I worked at a church in Arlington where we were literally the only people in the church between the ages of 18 and 45 with one exception. And so that one exception couple became really great friends of ours. We were super young. We were friends with them on his 21st birthday. And what he wanted to do for his 21st birthday was to go to the boats in Shreveport. That's what he wanted to do for his 21st birthday. So I was a good Baptist growing up. Carrie has always been pure as the driven snow, so it was all of our first experience in a casino. We had no idea what to expect. So we got up early that morning, we drove to Shreveport, we got there sometime in the middle of the morning, and we had this plan. All of us had saved up some money that for us at that time felt like really, really big money we'd saved for a while. So all of us took $100 with us to the boats in Shreveport, like $100 per person or something. It was Brad's birthday, so we felt like it was okay to go big. Well, the deal that we made was that when that money was gone, the money was gone. But we'd planned to stretch it out the whole day. And then whoever won the most money had to buy everybody else dinner on the way home late that night. So even if dinner cost more than whoever the winner was, whatever they won, they still had to buy dinner for everybody. So them's the rules. And we drove all the way to Shreveport. We got to the boats about 10 a.m. and decided to cash our chips in, our cash in for chips, and we're planning to be there for the whole day, $100 a person. Okay, no exaggeration. We were there at 10 a.m. By 10:30 a.m., we were back in the car looking for McDonald's to eat on the way home because all of us had already lost everything. That was the day we learned a valuable lesson about casinos. The house always wins. Well, after several more years of living and 0 more trips to gamble in casinos, I've discovered that's not just a principle for the boats. That's a principle for most of life. The world where we live isn't neutral territory. There's a system that's stacked against life with a capital L, and it has been since the very beginning. And the truth is, most of the time it feels like the house always wins. Luke 23, we did some background on the scene last week. Jesus found himself, and you see it again in this passage, up against a corrupt political system, a hypocritical religious system, a radical mob mentality. And here in Luke 23, they all come together to conspire against Jesus. Pilate doesn't see Jesus as a threat, but he won't risk his political capital to go against the current of the crowd. Herod wants to see a show, but he doesn't want to see anything that the show would show. The religious leaders claim to love God, but they make it clear they'd rather be rich and powerful than curious and responsive. And the crowd just moves along with the current. From a human standpoint, the scene in Luke 23, Jesus is caught in a rigged system. And yet, 2,000 years later, millions worship the one who seems like the loser in this story. And the people that held the power then in all of the different systems and structures, they're footnotes in the story of his story. At the cross, Jesus declares victory over systems and a world that's stacked against him and often feels stacked against us. You ever feel like the world's stacked against you? At the cross, Jesus declares victory over systems and a world that's stacked against him and against us. That's great news, isn't it? Especially if you felt that. And who hasn't felt that? You know why sometimes it feels like the world's stacked against you? Because the world's stacked against you. Jesus says this explicitly in John 16, doesn't he? And he says, look, people are going to hurt you in this world. It's set up that way. Not the way it was designed, but that's the way it's become. People are going to hurt you. You're going to lose people that you love. In this world, you're going to have trouble. But Jesus' journey towards the cross, we see it here in Luke 23, paves the way to hope through broken systems, whatever the broken systems are. It also paves the way to hope through the suffering that we're destined to feel in a world like this. That's the second thing that you see in Luke 23. At the cross, Jesus declares victory over suffering. But it sure doesn't look like it in the moment. I mean, notice, you see Jesus experiencing an amplified version of just about any kind of suffering that you can imagine experiencing in a world like ours, don't you? Physical suffering, this is as bad as it gets. Emotional suffering, abandoned by the people that you love the most, relational suffering, circumstantial suffering, and Jesus faces it all. He faces it all throughout his life. But it's dialed up to 10 in Luke 23. And yet pay attention to something about the victory over suffering here. You notice Jesus doesn't declare victory by avoiding suffering. A lot of us, that's how we set up our life. Just we feel like winning is to avoid suffering. But that's not the path that Jesus takes. He doesn't just take the path of just surviving suffering. A lot of us think that. I think that's one of the great lies of the enemy in our culture, is that victory in life just means surviving. Jesus' victory isn't seen through suffering's immediate removal. Sometimes that's what we think. If God really loves us, if we're really doing right, then life won't ever hurt. I think that's why we get some of this in detail. I think it's one of the reasons that God makes sure we see the whole story here. I think it's why it's so important for you and me to not be just one and done on the cross like we can be with 23andMe. Jesus' journey to the cross is exhibit A, that God doesn't always remove pain, even from people that he loves. Nothing will minimize our hurt in some moments. Jesus shows us that. Look, all of us are looking for some spiritual version of Novocaine or morphine. Something that just dulls our pain really quickly, removes the pain real quick. God doesn't always give that to us. I think you see it here. Sometimes there's pain too great for quick fixes. Jesus, he's living that here on several levels if you read the story. You ever had one of those moments where you're watching a brand new movie or read a brand new book? Somehow as you're reading it, you've got this feeling like, I've seen this story before. Maybe you're listening to a song. At some point in the song, you think, I've heard that line before. At some point, you realize it's intentional. The author, the artist, is sampling a song, recasting an old story, not in an attempt to improve on it, but as an opportunity to honor it. What Luke 23 helps us do, if we'll look at it and keep coming back to it, is to see our stories and even our suffering as a chance to recast an even better story. The story that we're a part of, to frame sudden pain and even unjust pain and suffering so that we can see and sometimes show that at least sometimes, at least one time in history, suffering is excruciatingly painful and ultimately productive. See, when you trust your life and even your suffering to a God who is an author of great stories, a giver of good gifts, and the lover of your soul, always all three at the same time, you can declare victory over your suffering, even before you're free from your suffering. Look, your suffering may not be proof that you're losing. It may be proof that God's writing a bigger story than your story, and a bigger story from your story. He may not remove all of your pain, but he will always redeem all of your pain. He will not waste a moment of pain in your life. None of it will be wasted, and none of it will be worthless when the story that he's writing is complete. And exhibit A, if you're wondering, is the cross. At the cross, Jesus declares victory over systems, victory over suffering. And at the cross, Jesus declares victory over sin. We hit on this a little bit last week, but look back at the conversation that takes place on both sides of Jesus as he's dying on a cross. Luke 23, beginning in verse 39. One of the criminals that hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you're under the same sentence? We're punished justly. We're getting what our deeds deserve. But this man's done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." And we said last week, what this second thief asked for at first feels like he's totally lost his mind, doesn't it? I mean, first of all, Jesus is hanging on a cross where he's dying the most excruciating death that the Romans could dream up. There was no future for him from here. Roman executioners knew how to make a person suffer. For everybody that's watching, those dying with him to those who followed behind him are watching from a distance. There is no when you come into anything from here. This is game over for the King of the Jews from literally everybody's vantage point in the moment. But even if there was a way out for Jesus, what this thief says doesn't make any sense. I think it makes sense to say to a current or future king, "I'm innocent. Remember me, reward me." Makes sense to say to a current or future king, "I'm guilty. Let's get this over with." Even "I'm guilty. Please take it easy on me." Nobody in their right mind says, I'm guilty. King, reward me. Unless they've just heard the king look at his crucifiers and call out to heaven for their forgiveness. Unless you realize that this man who is dying differently from all of the other people that you've seen die before. Nobody's taking his life. He's laying it down. And it's obvious somehow as you watch. For whatever reason, you begin to watch him die and you realize that he's winning by losing. And you don't know how it would work. You don't know if it could work. But if somehow he could forgive them, maybe he could forgive you. So you ask him. And he says, yes, you're forgiven. And there's hope for a future, even for guilty you. Knowing what we know now, we can back into what happened in that moment for him. The infinite God had stepped into his creation and lived the life that mankind was designed to live. Perfectly, without a spot or a stain or a sin on his record. Paul says it this way, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Look, sin, as the Bible describes, it's more than just a mistake, more than just a momentary indiscretion or even a moral defect. It's an act of treason against the King of the universe. Where in one way or another, and all of us have done this, we've declared, God, move out of the way. I'd be a better king than you. A better king than you of my world, and of my life, and my decision, and my future. So step down from the throne, I'll take it from here. Treason against the King of the universe. Or where we've looked at the one who it turns out is the author, the sustainer, and the giver of life. And we've disconnected our life from him. If you think about physical life support, you know if something's keeping you alive, it doesn't really matter if you unhook yourself from it a lot or just a little. It doesn't matter if it's big and dramatic and completely intentional or just a small, careless decision that has consequences you never dreamed it would have. The effect is the same. At the moment you disconnect from life, you start to die. So why? How could a God that we have tried to dethrone ever allow us to see paradise? How could a spiritually, physically, morally, relational, dead person like me, how could I ever be reconnected to the source of life? Only through a substitute. And because Jesus, who knew no sin, became sin for us, the debt can be paid. The punishment can be served. Look, what we deserved went on him, so that what he deserved can rest on us, can be lavished on us. That's the heart of the Christian message. It's not just a different set of moral codes or religious standards. It's not just a different way to try harder to be better. It's the polar opposite claim of every other religion in the world. It says, do your best to get to God. Hopefully you can make up for who you've been, and maybe he'll accept you at the end of the day. The message of Jesus is that God worked his way to you and took on himself everything you deserve so that you could be forgiven and set free. And at the cross, Jesus proclaims a way for your sin to be forgiven and your guilt to be removed and have no more power over you, not through a God who turns his head and looks the other way, but through a God who sees who you are and what you've done and where you've been and what you've become, looks straight at it and sees all of it, and agrees that you're guilty, and then dies in your place so that you can experience what you don't deserve. And in this moment, this thief doesn't know how it all fits together. He didn't know how it all works. He's not a theologian. He's not a scholar. He doesn't know all the answers to all the questions. He doesn't even know all the questions. But in this moment, he's put enough together to know that the guy on the middle cross promises to do something about his guilt and seems to be in control of his own life even while he's in the process of dying. And he says, Jesus, I don't know how to win after a life filled with losing. But somehow it's obvious that you do. And I don't know how it all fits together, but at this point, I'm convinced that that's more a problem of my understanding than it has anything to do with you as a person. I believe who you say you are, even if I don't understand everything that means. So if there's a future for you, Jesus, and forgiveness for them, could there be a future forgiveness for me too? And that's all it takes. This guy can't promise to behave better in the future. Apart from Jesus, there is no future for him. He can't give Jesus something that's going to make all the wrongs right. He can't do a religious ritual. He can't possibly pay off his guilt. There's not enough time, and he's literally too far gone. His only hope is to cry out for forgiveness. And Jesus says, good news, friend. Need is all you need. And yes is all you need to say. He says, I'll take your guilt and I'll give you life. And that day, that man went from hell on earth to paradise. That's Jesus' promise to you too. Look, you don't have to clean up your life first. You don't have to make a bunch of promises that you can't keep and won't keep to God. You don't have to fix a past that you can't fix. You don't have to answer all the questions or deserve forgiveness in the least. This guy's not trying to weigh out all of the stuff that he's done in front of Jesus and justify how even though he's done a couple of really, really bad things, he's done a whole lot of pretty good things, and he's hoping they balance out at the end. He has need, and he asks, and Jesus declares victory over his sin. So that's the most important thing, the most important question that you could ever ask yourself. Has there ever been a moment where you trusted Jesus like that? Look, I know maybe you grew up in church and you've tried really hard and you've done pretty good. I know maybe your grandma had a moment like that and you've always felt that maybe God would just reward you and let you in on your grandma's record. Maybe you've been trying to stack up a bunch of pretty good things to outweigh a few really bad things. Or you felt like you're too far gone to have any hope. The invitation from Jesus is here. He became the embodiment of who you were designed to be and then became the embodiment of everything that you had become instead. He took what you deserved so that he could give you what he deserves as a gift. He didn't die a cruel death on a cross just to get you a little more over the top of your pretty good life and good church-going attendance. He died on a cross because it was the only way for you to experience victory over sin. Whoever you are, whatever you've done, but you need. Have you realized your need and declared it to him? You need, and then you have to say yes. He's not going to force you to have life with him forever. He'll let you ignore him. He'll let you insult him. He'll let you assume that he's just like you, only a little more moral, perhaps. One thief on the cross does that, and it's haunting when you notice that Jesus doesn't argue with him. Jesus doesn't shame him or cajole him or force him to change his mind against his will. He invites him to say yes, but he allows him to say no. And he'll do the same for you. But seeing what you see, like knowing what you know, hearing what you've heard, how could you say no? How could you assume that you could do the equivalent of this for God on your own? Or that if Jesus went to this length, there could be another path. Would you trust him? 1941 in Auschwitz, prisoner escaped. In retaliation, the Nazi guards selected 10 men to die of starvation. One of them who was selected cried out, "My wife, my children," and everyone's hearts broke. And then something unexpected happened. A man stepped forward and removed his cap. He said, "I want to take his place." That man's name was Maximilian Kolbe. He was a follower of Jesus. The officers accepted the trade, and so did the man who was condemned to die. So they trade places. And Colby was sent to the underground bunker. But something strange happened there. As the guards listened from the outside, instead of wails of despair, shouts of anger, the guards heard people praying and singing. In the middle of despair, they heard hope and songs that sounded like victory. After 2 weeks, Colby was the only one still alive, still singing. So the guards ended his life another way. By the world's standard, it was anything but a victory. He didn't fight back. He didn't escape. He laid down his life. But Colby saw it differently because of another execution site 2,000 years earlier, when another man, innocent, stepped forward for him. And he felt like this was an opportunity to sample the song, to retell the story, to honor it, and to show it to others. The man, Maximilian Kolbe, died for, survived the war, dedicated the rest of his life to telling this story, not a story of Kolbe's defeat, but the story of ultimate victory. There at the foot of the cross, people watched. Some of them were certain that they were defeating a threat to their political aspirations or religious empire. Some of them watched, just caught up in the momentum of a crowd. Some of them had a moment watching others have a moment watching, and then went back to their ordinary life trying to win the rat race against everybody else. And some of them saw suffering coming for them because of the world where they lived and what happened to Jesus, and they wondered if it would come for them next. At least one of them saw victory through what looked like defeat. What does the cross mean for you 2,000 years later? Depends entirely on how you respond. Would you bow your head with me? Maybe this morning you feel like you're losing, like the system somehow stacked against you. Maybe this morning suffering is swallowing you whole. Maybe your sin feels too great. Maybe death feels like the end of the story. The death of Jesus is proof that victory doesn't always look like winning in the moment. The question is, do you trust the one who's already won? Lord, I pray for the person that came this morning who has never met you. They've been relying on their moral exercise, religious rituals, maybe even the reputation with you of somebody that they love, just hoping to ride in on their coattails. Lord, I pray this morning that they would hear that the news is so much better than that they can ride on the coattails of the beloved Son of God who came to the earth and lived a perfect life and died a traitor's death so that they could have his righteousness as a gift, and that this morning, right where they sit, they would declare their need to you in their own words, in the privacy of their heart in this moment. And they would say yes to your promise and invitation of hope and life with a capital L, and victory over their sin, its power, and ultimately its presence. Lord, I pray for some of us for whom the cross was like 23andMe. We trusted a long time ago. We were young, and we haven't gone back to it very often. Lord, I pray that we would live this story out, that people would look at our life and they would say, I think I've heard that story before. They would listen to the words that we say and say, I think I've heard that tune before. And that we would be able, Lord, to experience and to express hope that's beyond hope, not based on our own merit, but based on a Jesus who loves us and who reigns as King, even before it feels like it. And it's to him we worship this morning. In his name, amen.
Church, would you stand with us as we respond in worship this morning?